almost. Nope. That's why I said almost. Yep. Nope.
On the meeting back to order. Hope everyone had lunch. We will get going here. So, man sitting down. Are you ready? Okay. Tell me about your notification boundaries.
For cost of services analysis. Show that it's just
explain to me how that whole system works. The overall coverage area in Oregon for the last 5 years is reduced by 7,000 square miles. So to have that part of the discussion with the analysis, I don't know if this committee, as it was intended, without a concept submission form and having a good verifiable traceable document path forward. I think this topic should move into that discussion, make it a focal point for the cost of services analysis. Well, concepts is great in explaining
their workflow, their process, how they
manage and verify these changes to the system that's impacting our records. And I think it should be so I don't have any updates other than maybe a recommendation to scan this
and
merge this topic into
the concept submission form that we will talk about at the new business section of this meeting.
okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Update?
Yes. Data and Research Committee will be scheduling. Someone else must have their speaker not muted.
Everybody with computers, can you check your, make sure it's muted, not just in the meeting, but your general computing volume?
Test.
Okay.
I think it sounds better. The Data and Research Committee will be scheduling their next meeting after this board meeting. We don't have a date set. They're tackling the mandatory damage reporting. There were assignments made, and I think that'll be a big one. There's a Kitty found that Common Ground Alliance has a survey in progress on the same topic that they're expecting to have done, was it this month or next month?
Mid-May.
Mid-May. So that'll help inform that discussion as well. Then there was a shared resource with a summary of all states' damage prevention laws that she found as a part of that we'll be bringing back to committee as well. That was also from CGA. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, we have that delegation that'll be at CGA for best practices and sessions, and whatever we find there that's relevant to our group, we'll bring back and report. That's it.
Okay. Okay, so is Lynn still online?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Can you give us a report on the OUCC?
Yeah, just a second. We met yesterday afternoon, April 3rd. Wix Emmett presented Erica. She said that all of our local councils except for 2 have filed their taxes, and they anticipate by our next meeting to have everybody up and going and filed and good to go. So that's good. Anna Sargent presented for Alpha Media. We're trying to use them to get the word out to our underserved areas or high damage areas. 9 counties were targeted. Our goal is like 900,000 impressions. We had 3.51 thousand clicks, and we have a 0.35 click rate, which is sounds low, but is actually higher than average. We have 2 creatives that they're running, so ad faces, and pretty close to the end of that campaign. Sorry, I have a cold. Campaign that ends April 15th. So talked about sending Alba, and we voted to send her, as you guys talked about earlier, to joint states meeting. And that's it. And our next meeting is adjacent to yours at Salishan on July 17th.
Hold Scott, anything else?
I think so. Thank you to the board members that attended yesterday. It's always appreciated. I think it's good for the local councils just to see your involvement, and it's great if you guys do have the opportunity to get involved in your local councils. It's also a powerful voice. Like I said, we just Josh, Katie, and I going down to the mid-Willamette last week was, I think, very valuable to them. They appreciated the ability to ask questions and just kind of hear what's going on. So if you're in a region, there's councils just about everywhere, and if there's not an active council, what a great opportunity for you to maybe start one. So, Nate.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We have the CGA conference happening. Josh, you want to just confirm who is going?
I think we're covered there, just Lee, Kevin, and me. That's it.
Okay.
Kim sent you an invite to the OCC events that we're hosting there. So you should,
Thank you.
you're invited to those. And along with, if you have a guest that's traveling with you.
Okay, and we have just a presentation on micro trenching. Is that Mike?
Yes, hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time today. I have about 5 slides to go through to talk about a method of deployment that we've been working on now, for a better part of 5 years, and deploying actively around the country for about 2.5. The method is called Rapid Connect. It's a method that focuses on enabling companies like Crown to deploy fiber to where it needs to go in support of the demand for broadband and small cell densification required to enable that, without driving all of the sort of heavy impact to the roadway asset that typically occurs when you're doing this type of deployment work. So I'll jump in. When we first lined out this project and decided what did we want to try to solve for, we aligned against these 4 principles. The first one being safety. And by safety, we mean eliminating the risk of striking a utility or another network operator in the course of network construction. We focused on simplicity. Simplicity being a reduction in the size of the work zone and the amount of equipment and crews that we're placing in the right of way, to reduce the amount of traffic control required, and both sidewalk and roadway closures required in order to complete network construction. We wanted to make the process faster, and by faster we focused more on reducing the number of steps required to complete the end-to-end process rather than making machines move faster. And what you'll see is we've developed what's basically a one-pass process. So we are able to move through the right-of-way where there is no fiber network, create a pathway, place the fiber, and seal that pathway in one work effort, without any additional follow-up work that needs to be done. And last but not least, we wanted to make the process greener. We wanted to make the amount of spoils material coming out of construction much smaller. We also wanted to do it in a way that enabled us to be able to recycle some of those materials so that we weren't additive to landfills in the course of network construction. And we also focused on things like noise pollution and dust pollution and things like that by developing machines that operate at a much lower noise level and generate far less spoils material left in the right of way. And we can jump to the next slide. So in order to do that and do it in a way that was effective, we met with the folks at Corning. Corning is a Fortune 500 company. It's one of the oldest telecommunications, fiber optic telecommunications companies in the country. They're accredited with a lot of the advancements in fiber optic technology. They spend a good deal of their revenue every year on research and development, and partnering with them enabled us to develop network components that complement this process in a way that enables us to meet our standards of safety, network reliability, simplification of the process, the reductions in disruption that we're talking about, and also to leave behind a much smaller footprint post-network construction than you would typically expect from telecom deploying fiber in the right-of-way. The next slide will show a first look at the process. A milling head that's suspended in a free-floating way using a truck.
You go through that again, please.
Where did I lose you?
The beginning of this slide.
Okay. So on the right side of the slide is a picture of the two primary machines that we use in deploying using Rapid Connect. The machine in the foreground of the picture is what we call the pathway creation machine. Not super creative, but it's what it does. It creates our pathway. The front end of that machine has a milling head that's contained in a free-floating trunnion system that enables our milling head to maintain perpendicular contact with the surface of the roadway, regardless of the pitch of the road or the orientation of the machine or any changes in the surface of the roadway. That machine also has a very powerful vacuum system that pulls all of that spoils material that we create and captures it cleanly in bags at the back of the machine that can be taken off of the machine and transported off-site to be recycled into fresh asphalt. The smaller machine in the background of that picture is what we call the network creation machine. That machine is the machine that places the fiber into our pathway and then seals that pathway with a sealant material that we've adapted from roadway marking tape, working with the folks at Corning and a company called ATM, which is one of the primary manufacturers of that material. On the left side of the slide, you'll see three inset pictures. The first picture on the far left is a picture of the profile that we create in the surface of the roadway. So we're entirely contained within the wear course of the asphalt. And what we do is we reshape that surface of the roadway into this roughly T-shaped profile, 2 inches wide. So it's very, very narrow. It's a recessed area that is about 2/10 of an inch deep with a center slot cut in the middle of it that is 1/4 of an inch wide and goes no deeper than 5/8 of an inch below the surface of the roadway. In that center inset picture, you see the cable in place in that pathway. So that cable fits neatly into that slot that we create in the center of the recess. And then we immediately apply a sealant material over that recessed area to seal the network in. That enables those two machines plus a couple of technicians with smaller hand tools to move through the right-of-way, creating the pathway, placing the fiber, and then sealing that network in. So as that second machine passes, that roadway can be reopened for pedestrian and vehicular use. Jump to the next slide. This slide is going to give us a graphic representation of the difference in size and scale and talk a little bit about the reduction in impact that we've achieved with this method. Far left, you've got traditional trenching, 2 feet wide, 3 feet deep, obviously impactful to the asset. You're cutting through the asphalt, you're cutting through the engineered road base to get to conduit depth. You have to restore all of that in order for the roadway to be reopened for use, and very often compaction issues might lead to return visits to repair any damage that might have occurred later. Microtrenching solves for a good deal of that impact by reducing the amount of excavation required pretty significantly, but it still requires us to penetrate the asphalt course and either into the engineered road base or below it into the subgrade, depending on the size of the conduit package and whatever local rules around microtrenching there are. But we still go from 2 feet wide and 3 feet deep to roughly 2 inches wide and anywhere from 12 to 26 inches deep. So it is a dramatic reduction in impact. The rapid connect method just takes that and really kind of pushes it all the way to the least amount of impact we could come up with in a deployment method. And the scaled representation makes that profile so small that we zoomed it so you get an idea of the profile and the dimensions of it in that inset view. So it's a roughly T-shaped profile, like I said before, 2 inches wide, 2/10 of an inch deep. The purple bar that you see in that slide represents the sealant material that we place into that recess. And that circle with the colors is a representation of the fiber cable that sits in that 1/4 inch wide slot that goes no deeper than 5/8 of an inch. The width of that profile is created so that vehicle tires passing over it largely bridge the gap between the two sides of that recess. They don't completely bridge the gap, so we do get some pressure from tires, and that's by design. But what it does for us is it reduces the amount of pressure that we're getting, so we get a much longer lifespan out of the sealant material than we otherwise would. The pressure applied by tires as they roll over the path actually reinforce the bond of the sealant material. It's a pressure-sensitive adhesive that bonds it to the surface. So every time a vehicle rolls over it, it just reinforces that bond. And by setting it just that tiny bit below the surface of the roadway, we're protecting that sealant material from things like snow plows or lift gates or construction equipment like boxes or shovels that might pass across the surface of it. Obviously, at a depth of 5/8 of an inch, the risk of striking a utility or another network operator is eliminated. Even a properly placed traffic loop would not be damaged by this network passing over the top of it. And because we're taking such a small amount of spoils material, and that spoils material is all of a single source, the amount of impact environmentally is greatly reduced, and again, recyclable. So there's really nothing additive to a landfill process. So I'll wrap it up with the last slide. This just gives you a general idea of the improvement we've seen with Rapid Connect. We've been deploying this around the country for about 2.5 years now, and so far very successfully. We haven't run into any major issues with this type of deployment or the location of the network. But you're going from weeks with traditional trenching to hours with Rapid Connect. So we're able to pass through an area, reopen the roadway within a few hours. Very often folks in those communities aren't even aware that construction occurred if they've been away at work or otherwise occupied during the course of construction. We've reduced the amount of lane closures from many closures, lots of flagging, detours, complex traffic control patterns, all the way down to not needing to close the roadway at all by keeping this work zone mobile and reopening the roadway as we go. We've eliminated the risk of utility strikes, as I said earlier, going from moderate risk with traditional trenching or something like directional boring. There's always the risk of striking another utility or operator. This eliminates that risk. Restoration is immediate with Rapid Connect as opposed to weeks or hours with other methods. And again, it's extremely low impact, not only from the spoils perspective, but also from a noise dust perspective. With that, I'll pause. I think I had a 10-minute slot. I hope I didn't go over.
Perfect.
Great.
Hey, Mike, can you talk a little bit about grind and overlay and how rapid deployments function in that scenario?
Sure. So one of the things about deploying the network in this way is that the network is accessible, right? And this is what makes us comfortable existing in the wear course of the asphalt, specifically because of grind and overlay operations. So we can take that network out of that pathway very quickly. We can take thousands of feet out of the roadway, safe it off back a curb in just a few hours, which enables us to move out of the way of capital mill and overlay projects that are occurring with very short amount of notice. And the vendor that's doing the work could, as a part of their notification process to the asset owner, could tie us into that, and we could get out there and move out of the way without disrupting any schedules very quickly. Once that milling operation has taken place, we actually have the ability to recreate that pathway in the milled course of the roadway, place the network back into the pathway, seal it in, and allow paving to take place over the network. It does no harm to the network and seals it in nicely under a single lift of asphalt. And at that point, that network would be considered sort of left in place. We wouldn't try to get back to it if there were any issues with it. Not that we anticipate any issues when your network is sealed in. In the case of emergency work, or if there's a dig that disrupts our cable and damages it in any way, we're perfectly within our SLAs. Our ability to replace the network is so quick that we can get back out there. Simpler network to maintain, and
It's
therefore
been submitted by a, an overlay is where that network, and it's locatable, right? The challenges of asset protection that are traditionally, you know, you've got energized lines below the surface, that doesn't exist with fiber. You're gonna get a flash of light. So the risk of using something like rapid or really any form of microtrench is somewhat eliminated because the only damage is to the network operator, and we can fix it pretty quickly. This is just the coolest construction I've ever seen. Like, when I first got partnered with Crown on Rapid, and in full disclosure, I am a corporate lobbyist for Ziply Fiber. I do work with Kathy Putt, who is the corporate lobbyist for Crown Castle. This is on behalf of the telecommunications industry as a whole. Comcast has joined in this. All the small operators are joined in this, because this is how we're going to deploy broadband very rapidly in areas where you have underground utilities today, with next to no risk to the public, other than potentially if we have a fix that we have to do, we got to do some sort of traffic control to get down into that repair quickly. But I think this is super amazing. It's really interesting to sit down with cities and talk with them about how microtrenching can change the accessibility of broadband in their city and the different forms of pushback that we get. So it actually came through Alba to Josh, which then came to me. And I said, it's a good idea to let's get Crown here to talk about it, because this board could be very influential in having this conversation with municipalities that we're trying to talk to today.
Yeah, I'll add that
All over. I mean, we're doing this we have pilots. Mike, I'm going to talk a little bit about your pilot in Happy Valley.
sure.
So they piloted in Happy Valley. They did a pilot in the city of Portland. We're trying to get some pilots set up with Lake Oswego and Beaverton and Hillsborough. Different politics at play there, which are kind of driving this. State of Washington, we've used a form of microtrenching in the city of Lake Stevens, the cities of Oak Harbor, which is of particular significance because there's a huge cultural resource in the city of Oak Harbor. So you have a lot of Department of Historic Preservation concerns and Native American tribes that have to do a lot of cultural monitoring when you're doing an excavation. What's great about this is you get it out of all of those areas. This is a previously disturbed surface. right? This is in the road bed that gets changed out every 5 to 10 years. So a lot of the concerns about digging really go away when you're talking about micro trenching, especially if you're on a road surface. California, the first real strong showing of rapid, Mike, was it Hollywood Boulevard?
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard, thank you. In a single revolution of the light cycle, they crossed Sunset Boulevard, which I think is 5 or 6 lanes, right? I mean, it moves so fast. A traditional trenching method, you can deploy maybe 500-600 feet a day. If you're directionally boring and you're not going through rock, maybe 500 feet a day. This thing can go miles in a single day, which shortens your construction interval, which makes it less expensive overall. It's just amazing. And I'm sure it's not perfect, but it is by far some of the best technology I've seen yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that it's feedback from groups like this that informed this method, right? So when we set out to do this, we didn't just look for a method that enabled us to build fiber faster. We figured the best solution here was a shared solution where we're solving for a lot of the feedback we've gotten around the impact to the asset, the disruption that network construction causes to traffic, both vehicular and pedestrian, and look to solve for those problems, as well as being able to move quickly and be able to move predictably, which is really the most important part for us, is that we can move without the risk of having an impact that forces us to stop and repair before we can continue. So it's great for us to be able to just sort of talk about this and kind of show what we've developed, because it was this type of feedback around utility coordination and the reasons why we do what we do around coordination that informed this method of deployment. And so far, it's been very successful. We have over 100 approvals, different municipalities around the country, and we've been actively deploying in those rights of way for well over 2 years now.
I got a question for you. As an operator that, you know, runs a water system in the right of way, when we would, you know, excavate a new service line through, something like this seems like a pretty big obstacle to do your saw cutting and open excavation. How do you deal with that?
Because it's underneath a flowable fill. I'm sorry, Mike, you want to answer that?
Yeah, happy to. The sealant material is meant to be removable so that we can lift that network out very quickly. In the event that there's a dig that's an emergency dig, you're cutting on a leak, let's say, and you have to get down there quickly, we can come back and we can put our network back together in a matter of hours, right? And this is a method that's been developed primarily in the support of small cell deployment, right? The densification of those nodes that's required to enable the broadband latency and the throughput that these 5Gs and all the Gs beyond that are promising. But in order to do that, you know, you need to get fiber where it needs to go. And this is a way of doing that in a way that enables us to connect those nodes. If a node gets disconnected for a few hours, the worst that happens is it fails over to the next node in line, or fails back to the macro site in the area. So it's not hugely disruptful. It's not service impacting in the sense that it's not, you know, you won't lose connectivity. And we can get out and again, repair this in a very short period of time. If it's capital work, though, we want to work within the rules, right? We want to go out and locate it or relocate it ahead of any of this planned work to preserve the connectivity in the network. And we can do that very easily. We can do it very quickly. So, you know, we'll go out and locate the network. We'll identify it as being shallow. It's visually locatable because it's at the surface, but we'll also make sure it's clear to whatever crews are constructing that this network is at the surface and it's not at depth, with the intention of, you know, hey, you know, all this work is planned, call our NOC, we'll send a tech out. They can move that network out of the way very quickly, and the work can continue. Our goal is not to be disruptive or to interfere with the, you know, the work that is ongoing in the right of way. But in the event that we are incidentally damaged, we can get out and repair it very quickly.
What about, like, he mentioned capital work and then emergencies, what about just routine work, like if we have to board a new service center or do something, how long of a turnaround are we talking to get notification to get you guys out to move it?
20,
Yeah.
when we use this in the distribution, so that's for small cell, we're using this for distribution in like residential business fiber, same day. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
and then if there is a hit, our techs can have that network back up and running in under 4 hours. And that's really just like scheduling time and getting somebody there. The physical splicing is less than 15 minutes.
Yeah, it would be a simple dispatch. It's not a complex, a dispatch where we send a few techs out with hand tools and they can make these repairs very quickly.
I see a lot of positive here because the potential, the risk reduction, the potential damage prevention to traditionally installed underground facilities and using traditional methods to install fiber is basically, the risk to those underground facilities is practically eliminated with this method. And the risk is almost more so shifted to the fiber company, but the cost reduction for installing fiber has been reduced so far by doing this that I'm sure that shift is, actually still beneficial.
It's meaningful.
Yeah.
It's a meaningful difference in cost.
So are you using his services or have you bought the micro machines?
We have micro trenching machines that are not Crowns, and we're doing some joint pilot work together now. Pushback from public works directors who just don't believe the technology. Cut you see there, they use a flowable fill that isn't as mobile as what we're using with Rapid, but it works the same way. And in fact, if you look at the road surfaces 5 years after that flowable fill has been placed, the road surface around it has not shattered when the road immediately adjacent to it has, because that helped create structural integrity for the road surface. So I would like to ask the board to consider some sort of a positive, not a recommendation or endorsement of Crown as a provider, right? I'm not interested in looking at that, but microtrenching is a good thing. We as a big board, we're here to protect underground facilities, and if we say it's a good thing, that goes a long ways when we're talking to municipalities around the state of Oregon for this type of an issue.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Something that hasn't been, presented is that PUC adopts new edition of the NESC code every 5 years. And although there isn't a specified depth of burial for communication lines, the code does say that it shall be sufficient to protect the cable or duct from damage imposed by expected surface usage. There's also another code that says that for particulars that are not specified in the scope of these rules, that accepted good practice for given local conditions known at the time by those
Hey, Kevin, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I can't hear you right now.
the crack seal that they're putting down, it's color matched and texture matched to the road surface around it. You can't even tell it's there for the first couple of years, and then as the road degrades and if they haven't tarred over it, then you're gonna start to see it, it's gonna show up more because it'll be a darker line. But again, if you look at the pictures of that stuff 5-10 years later, that's better than the road around it. It's amazing what it does. And it's just been at first there was concerns over rain, because you can't do micro trenching in heavy rains. Your construction window is actually more limited than what it is with typical construction, because you have to have the road surface and the ground beneath it stable, right? So if it's saturated with water, you're just gonna fill in with water when you go to micro trench. You wait till you get to the dry season, but you can shorten that construction window to about 10 weeks, and you can cover 4 to 6 times as many locations as what you would do with traditional trenching or traditional core.
This is used a lot in California.
Yep.
Super cool. I guess my thought is the board and the concept of it is, this is introducing something new that requires the company to be responsive, not only to Mark, but also, like, there's no way we can excavate and not damage anybody's other utilities, and we don't have to coordinate with them because of the rules. But this is something that would require the responsibility on the provider to coordinate, and how, like, I love it. That would be my thought is, it's gonna create.
It's shifting a liability that currently today is borne by all utility owners or utility operators. And frankly, as a fiber company, hit my network. I've got probably 5 or 6 routes in and out of that location. My customers are not gonna be disrupted. I'm gonna roll a truck, I'm gonna fix it for $150, right? Like, that's, to me, that's a liability I'm happy with.
Yeah.
A lot of what I get in design locates, like, this goes away. 'Cause I'm telling you exactly where it's at, and you're not designing around it, you're gonna cut through it, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine, but like, as a city who does road cuts and does that, if we're doing a cut and knocking out somebody's internet for an hour and a half,
For the baggage.
that if they get pissed at us, and you're like, oh.
If you don't do anything.
Yeah.
How you follow the permit. And clearly 99% of the permit at this point are between 26 and 36 inch.
But that's because there's a natural bias towards
Yeah.
facilities being vulnerable, which is why bringing it to this board, as board saying, we really don't see that as a vulnerability. Now you have something to have a conversation about. Well, if the utility notification center board says it's not something to worry about, help me to understand why you feel that way.
We've just adopted this rule that this board doesn't even touch. I mean, we don't talk about barrel depth. I just don't see how this is relevant for this board to take up. We can like it, but taking a position to endorse when there's rules from other agencies that deal with this, it's presents conflict.
What if we're not taking a stance to endorse it per se, but we're taking a stance stating that this method poses minimal risk to underground facilities?
I think it would be a conversation to have with the PUC leadership, really.
Because I think that that's a fair statement. It poses minimal risk to traditionally installed underground facilities.
To facilities, but to address what the burial depth for those facilities should be.
Oh, I'm not, yeah, and I agree that we shouldn't get into the realm of depth and what depth should be and those things, but from a damage prevention, safety perspective, this creates so much less risk than.
I get it. but it's also the facility that's going in the ground. And there's, you know, code there to consider as well. You know, I don't rag on OSHA's rules because they're OSHA's rules.
I think it's a great process when can be utilized. It is a simple way of extending, you know, with all the goods and bads that, you know, you gotta put a balance. You put a little piece of fiber under 3-inch, oh, I'm good, I didn't damage anything. Well, hold on, somebody else comes after you and they have to dig. Did I create any issue for those guys by me being under the concrete surface? That's one. I think it's a great tool to have, and it can be used in certain ways and types based on the regulation that we have and based on what we have, but I don't think the board can say yay or nay.
I agree. I definitely feel like we need to have more information,
Yeah.
in order to endorse anyone or anything. That's my opinion on it.
Have we ever endorsed
the
product?
I don't know.
I don't know that it's,
Yeah.
don't use the word endorsement,
Yeah.
because that's not what's being sought here.
Okay, so
This
where-
is
then
just
what are you?
Exactly what Jamie said, that this particular installation for fiber optic presents minimal concern for damage to underground facilities.
Okay,
That's
so-
it.
So this would be like a concept submission form that would be approved by the board and sent to OARs for.
This wouldn't go into OARs,
No,
this wouldn't be a
no.
policy, this wouldn't be a rule change. This would just,
And how you would like to present that idea out to the public? That would be a statement.
Yeah,
And you
I
cannot make a
guess I don't
statement.
understand what
I
you're
mean, we
really
can
asking.
talk here and say, yeah, it's a great tool. We love the fact that they don't damage anything, and damage prevention is, you know, one of our missions, correct? We love it. But we can endorse it, and we cannot present it to, because if you present it to the public that we like it, we endorse it.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's, you know, how it's the best way to say, yeah, we like this, but we don't say anything.
so how did it get here in the first place? Was that Alba was at work and saw that Crown was doing this presentation and wanted to come into Clackamas County and do a pilot. And she got concerned and said, this is bad. Sent it to Josh and said, we should fight that. We need to, you know, let people know about this and get rid of it. Make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't think it was that it was bad, it was just, this is something new.
It's something new,
We need
yeah.
more information.
Yeah.
Microtrade has been around for a while, but the Rapid Connect that does this technology, are they the only company that's doing it so far?
The super shallow?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So, like,
proprietary to them.
I don't want to use the word, but whatever word you use, if you're suggesting that, are you suggesting to use a proprietary company to where you're not suggesting other people and other, I mean, it'd be different if it was like, hey, boring is the way to go. There's so many outfits that bore, but with this, it's just one person.
Micro trenching, I wouldn't.
To clarify that a bit, right? For a period of time, this is proprietary to Crown. It's not intended to be proprietary forever. In fact, Corning is our partner in developing this method. Corning has an interest in opening this up and being more broad. So this will be, in time, it will be a method of deployment that will be used by other companies, right? We've been going around talking to municipalities and getting approval from different municipalities around the country to deploy this method. So this is a method that's coming on board. And at a time in the future, a few years from now, this will expand beyond Crown and Crown's control. But for the moment, it is. All we're doing is sharing the information, looking for, you know, first of all, we wanted your feedback, and all the feedback we've gotten is actually incredibly helpful and valuable. But we also want to make you aware that it's there, and we want, you know, the sort of, you know, just the validation to say, yeah, we've looked at it, and it's not damaging the asset, it's not disrupting traffic flows, it's not disrupting pedestrian use of the right of way. It solves for getting fiber where it needs to go with minimal impact. There are obviously negatives to every method of deployment, but we feel that the positives in the case of Rapid Connect far outweigh the negatives. And that's all we're looking for.
Hey, Mike, is the rapid method, is that a permanent or temporary?
It's as permanent as any fiber network is, right? So we deploy fiber to locations and we maintain that fiber to those locations. When you think about the method of deployment, think of it in terms of how long is it needed in that location. A lot of places around the country have fiber built to them that no longer are using that fiber or need that fiber. For as long as there's a need at the other end of that connection, that fiber will be maintained in a good state of operation. If for whatever reason that node turns down, we'll remove the fiber, and it can be done in a very quick and fairly painless way. But the word permanent is something we talked a lot about because we're challenging some conventional sort of thinking around network deployment. Bury it deep, make sure it's down there and it's going to stay down there for 25, 30 years without being disrupted or damaged. But the reality is that boards like this exist because that's not true. That the coordination required and the amount of activity that goes on in the utility corridor is such that damage occurs all the time. We challenged some of that convention and we said, well, we can deploy a network and maintain that network in a different location, reduce the amount of damage occurring to other assets that are deployed at conduit depth, and still accomplish our goals. The driving philosophy behind all of this is based on feedback from groups like yours.
Mike, we have a question in our chat. Can you explain who Crown is again, please?
Sure. The Crown is an operator of both tower assets, small cell assets, and enterprise fiber assets. We deploy primarily for service providers and large enterprise businesses, local governments, healthcare, school systems, things like that. The work that we're talking about here related to this Rapid Connect is primarily in support of small cell deployments around the country. So our primary customers being $30,000 towers.
Hotspot is a great idea, for sure.
We're not liable for the damage.
Now, if we were located and you hit it,
You are.
then you have liability, but if it wasn't located properly, then, and Micah can tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Right. I mean, we follow.
About 25% of the time, there's actually like a transaction of damage, but most of the time.
You gotta look at this micro trenching the same way you look at every utility.
Right.
It's the same concept. It's the same concept. You still have to co-locate. You still have to pothole it and how big. It'll be funny to see when I have to cross a micro trenching with a bigger line, how I'm gonna pothole to see the depth of your micro trenching when it's 2 inches deep.
So, I get what you were saying earlier about, usually it's in the right of way, it's probably franchise utilities, so the city should
Yeah.
know, but when they do a grind and lay and they forget it's there.
Then
you
it
don't have
gets
to
all
call.
wound up and then we come out and we lay it back down.
Yeah,
And there's no
forgetting.
No, there's no liability to the city because it's been transferred to the owner in the franchise agreement in the very
No.
beginning. So that's the cost of doing business in cities these days.
So just a question, just so I understand, so if you were asked to locate
That's
this,
what
would the operator then tell them this is a micro?
Right.
Yeah.
That it's only 2 inches deep?
Yeah,
Or would
they'll-
you just leave it open to them?
So
5/8 of
in
an inch.
this,
Yeah.
in this case, they'll come and actually move it out of the way, right? They'll come scoop the fill out, lift put it up on temporary riser while what's happening, the road surface is happening.
Which is all fine and
Bring
dandy
it back
if you're
down.
out there when they're doing the work, but if you're not out there when they're doing the work.
They get called beforehand to move it. I mean, this happens, the way I've seen this happen in our own network. We have a micro trench location. We know the city's getting ready to do something that's gonna disrupt that line. We go out, we pull what we can out of that trench. Some of it's just gonna get hit. Service disruption isn't necessarily a problem with it.
So he calls in a locate, gives it 2 days, but he's not actually doing the work till the 8th day. You're gonna be out there to do that on the 8th day, or does he have to communicate with you at that point?
No, it usually gets pulled, but it'll get pulled within the
2 days?
the 2 days.
Yeah.
When we will dispatch, not just for the locate, if we know it's micro trench, we'll dispatch for the locate to get the paint on the ground and dispatch tech to move it, same day.
Okay.
We don't wanna be. And service disruption is really about your network design, right? So while comms needs point to point, modern network designs do not result in huge service disruptions if they've actually been designed that way. My network didn't go down during the last ice storm. Everybody else's did. So that's as much about the operator not designing their network to withstand what we know is gonna happen, because it's gonna get hit. That's why we're here.
I think the disruption is to the work crews. So like, if we're doing a grind inlay, we're not calling in locates, we're the state, so we've got a ton of highways that go through these cities, counties. We're gonna hit it and we're gonna have to shut down. That's
Well, yeah, I
70,000
mean,
a day.
the
Disruption of your work.
The work crews,
But
yeah.
you guys have a permit, so you know it's there.
So no, absolutely not.
You had to give me a permit for me to place it in the first
So
place.
our office staff would know it's there. Our engineer staff knows it's there. Our maintenance crews that are doing the work, they won't know it's there. There's a big.
I think there's an exception on the rule, if you're grinding the road and you repave it or whatever, you don't have to call locate.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's under.
So if you're,
so
I think it's,
Our-
I think it's a great.
that can be fixed.
our goal in all of this is to tie into whatever notification process the asset owner is using when they're doing these types of mill and overlay projects. So if your contractor is out there and they're gonna be milling Main Street between First and 10th Avenue on a particular time, we'd love to be able to get notified at the same time the asset owner gets notified and go out and move our network out of the way. If for whatever reason we don't, that's okay. Mill it up. The network is designed to just disintegrate under the mill. We will replace it. Our first effort will be to temp it out, get service back up and running while that work's ongoing. My second effort will be to replace the network once it's done. But the intention here is not to disrupt any of that work, not to disrupt those crews, not to interfere in any way, because we understand that this placement could be disruptive. We made efforts to make sure that our process is not, and that we're able to work around the mill and the overlay work that is occurring. So the intention here is not to disrupt those crews. And frankly, we can do that, and we've seen it. We've done mill and overlay interference work in Western New York, in the suburb of Rochester, and we were able to work with those crews during the mill and overlay process in a way that didn't disrupt our service and didn't disrupt their work. And that's our standard process for all of this.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, this is Nathan. Would a board endorsement, blessing, recommendation lead to a competitive advantage for Crown over other utility installation contractors?
No, I think what we're looking for is something we can show to a municipality that's interested or talking to us about doing this work. It's not something that we're looking to corner a market on. And like I said, we do have a few years of exclusivity before this opens up broadly. But those approvals, once this opens up, would be open for any operator to follow the rule set that's been developed and go and deploy using this method. Our goal in exclusivity is not so much to try to create a market or create some kind of monopoly. Our goal is to deploy this in a very systematic and very consistent way in every municipality that we seek approval from. We've learned from the experience of microtrenching that when too many operators develop too many different methods and too many different standards for a particular method of construction, you wind up with very disparate results, right? You get good results in some locations, not so good results in other locations. It's our strong belief that if we can deploy this in a very systematic way at the outset, and then that rule set is standardized across all municipalities, that the overall benefit to every operator that's deploying is improved, Crown included, because there won't be this variance in the ultimate end product or the reliability of that end product. So we're not looking to have exclusivity forever, just long enough for us to make sure that this gets a good start, gets deployed in a very systematic way. And then that rule set is pretty standard across all the munis that are approving it.
Go ahead, Robbie.
I don't think I think it sounds like a great idea, but I also thought the same thing about like things in my industry, so not knowing fiber. If the board were to try to attempt an endorsement or a statement, does that open us up to, when people see that, like, and this is with water, like bursting and slip lining, which are probably safer techniques, but not always applicable, does it open us up to now we're starting to do recommendations for companies like that? Do they see this and it becomes a trickle effect where more manufacturers, more vendors come and want an endorsement or a statement?
And more meeting time.
What's that?
And more meeting time.
I don't know what those technologies mean.
So like slip lining a pipe, if you have a,
Existing pipe.
yeah, you have an existing pipe, like an existing wastewater pipe that is terracotta or AC that's leaking.
Right.
Rather than dig it up and replace it, you do a line, you run a line through there.
Right.
It's much more friendly, like you're not excavating, but there are some pros and cons to it. And then with pipe bursting, you have say an old 4-inch, cast iron main or C900 main, you can come through with a pipe burster and burst that and then follow through with like an 8-inch pipe. So rather than true directional boring, you're using the pipe as a guide, so you are still in the ground, but it's just probably safer. So what I'm getting at is those are supposed to do that. That's more what my question is.
Well, we're here to protect underground facilities, and we say
We can vote on this, if somebody wants to put a motion forward. I mean, it's not necessarily my say because we are a board. So, but, I don't agree with us putting our name on any sort of statement at this time.
I have a question.
Sure.
I agree with that part too. I think before I would consider it, maybe if we had suggested language of what we're talking about, having that prepared for us and saying, hey, this is actually what we're gonna talk about instead of just this open concept and then us wordsmithing it. I think that's so if we maybe brought back suggested language, and my second thought is this more appropriate for like CGA and their best practices? Would it be more appropriate for them to take an action on this versus the state board? Because I don't think the state typically gets involved in that. I can't think of any other state department, and maybe there is, and if there is, that'd be helpful for me to see another state department that says, okay, this is, we're aware, like we can say we're aware of it, but I think the concept, so I want to see the words, and maybe CGA might be better to take on something like this.
That was my suggestion after we met with them the first time too. I thought that would be a natural, because they are responsible for best practices. They literally wrote the book, so.
Right.
And then honestly, seeing this micro trenching, it's another way of placing a utility in the ground. That's all there is. It's just another way. You can do boring, you can do trenching. In boring, there are different ways. You can use over the head, you can use a missile, you can use this. There's all kind of different ways. And micro trenching, it's just another way to play.
Promoting studies, hosting studies, you know, and to have more information to, you know, as far as the state agency, you know, making a best practice, it's backed by a study, it's backed by, you know, a workshop of some sort, and there's, so, it's not just a.
Yep. I think our audience is back online, right? Okay. Mike, I just wanted to say thank you so much for presenting to us and making us aware.
My
So
pleasure. Thank you so much for the time and the great discussion today.
All right, thank you.
And sorry for the disruption of the connection. We had a really bad connection here.
It happened. No worries.
Yeah.
Take care, folks.
Adding to our experience.
Do we have any other national material news? We can move on. Okay. Any old business? It doesn't look like that we have it on our agenda. So let's talk about the new business. There are two concept submission forms. One is in regards to committee assignments. Now, I want to remind everyone that we submit the concept submission forms to the board as an idea to discuss. The board then says, hey, let's take this to a committee so the committee can hash it out. You know, they're only ideas. It's not what you have to actually take. It's just maybe an outline of ideas that pop up, and then the committee can run through it and say, yeah, I like this. Hey, let's add this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And then the committee brings it back to the board when we're done with that. So with that said, did everyone look through these two concept submission forms? Okay. So the first one here, I can barely see that. So the first one here is assignments. So I promised you guys I would bring back the committee assignments. So this is the committee assignments. Right now we have two standing committees, and that's the OAR and publicity. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ad hoc committees. Essentially, when I was reading in Robert's rules, the ad hoc committees are committees that they serve a purpose and then they're done. Okay, all of these committees that we have in ad hoc right now are a part of our strategic plan. So they're obviously serving a purpose, but we're not eliminating them. So my suggestion would be to move the budget and audit, the training, the policy and procedures, and the data committee over to the standing committees. Okay? And then the notification and boundaries committee, as Kevin already discussed, we would eliminate that one, yet move the concept of that committee over to, I believe, data and, yeah, the
of services analysis.
the cost of service analysis, but we move that over to a committee. But then we also have Jessica's, the idea of the governance committee. So,
If I may,
yes,
policy and procedure was established as an ad hoc committee so we could rewrite the policy and procedure manual. It was a separate committee that could just cover all the policy stuff in one place. It was supposed to go away. I remember very distinctly being told my tenure as chair was going to be short, and here we are, 3 years later.
The new thing
Right.
or the?
and I think it's gonna keep going.
It's going to go
At
on
the
and
same
on,
level,
right?
though, I mean, we are gonna plateau out.
Yeah, we will, definitely.
Which is why tucking it into a governance committee that doesn't require a separate agenda and separate meetings, and we could just cover that as a part of general policy discussion, is just easier.
I agree that it makes it easier. I don't agree with combining them because I feel like we make rules, we make our rules to our OARs, and then policy and procedures are operating procedures. So
Operating policies.
yes, I don't think that those two go hand in hand. And I think when you leave the board, there's gonna be somebody else stepping into your position there. So I just feel, my personal feeling, you guys can have others, that we still keep them separate. Not everyone wants to go to a governance committee and talk about the policy and procedures. You know, they wanna talk about OARs.
I don't know that, like, I'm of the opinion that the fewer committees you can have, the more beneficial it is and the higher engagement you'll have. Having 5, 6, 7 committees turns me away from wanting to be a part of it. Like, I don't have the time to invest in a bunch of different committees. But if you have some succinct, broader committees, that you would have a possibility of more engagement.
I agree with that, and I also agree with the fact that combining those committees makes sense to me because, yes, OARs is separate, it's the standards manual, policies and procedures are, our rules that we follow. But those are items that every board member ideally should be involved in. Those are, discussions that a lot of board members could benefit from being involved in those. So,
But not everyone that is a part of the committee is a board member. So we want everyone to be a part of the OARs.
And dissolve the committee.
We want public engagement too on the OARs. It's not just, the opportunity to present something that's very succinct that impacts the livelihood of their operations versus not their business. And board business is this, has always been this side thing that the public, they don't really grasp that. And so as long as I've been part of this or around this on Prepville, OAR has always been its own dedicated piece that outside stakeholders, even non-board members, could participate in because they knew what was coming. And if, if it just turns into a conglomerate of governance, then, we have three things to do: the tariff, develop rules, and rates. So can we make the argument that those are all governance too? And so there is some benefit of keeping them succinct and separate as for presentation to the public.
And one of the reasons why we keep this in committee is because different people that have different interests. Because otherwise, why do we have committees? When we can make one single committee for all of them, correct? If we want the less and the less and the less. And OAR was always one committee, as long as I know. About 9 years, I don't know what's going on.
The workload is pretty shifted though, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot on the work log when I was told to chair. And now we're down to one item that's open, right? I'm just looking for efficiencies here.
Yeah.
And frankly, Madam Chair, with your next concept submission, I'm not sure I want to be a chair if I'm doing that level of work for two committees. That's a lot of obligation as a chair. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into preparing for separate committee meetings.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I don't necessarily have, it's not like a board meeting where staff does most of the work, right? I'm really involved. And we're asking a lot of people in those positions. Changing the scope, fewer committees, maybe makes that a little bit easier, I don't know.
Okay, so I think the first thing we need to decide is if we are going to combine the committees or not, meaning the OER and the publicity. And then if that committee is going to be standing or not, and if we would like to move the ad hocs over to standings. Sorry, I should have wrote all this down.
A lot of steps.
Is
Okay,
that
so
the first thing we do?
let's do the first one. So the first one is the governance. So, what? Yeah. So Jessica, you had a motion, ready? Do you want to go with that motion, or do we want to make a new one?
Sure. Combining policy and procedure committee with OERs as a standing committee be what I'm asking the board to consider.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any more discussion? Okay, instead of saying I or I, can you raise your hand if you approve this decision?
You're a board member, you
Make sure we
weirdo.
get it online too.
We have Lynn
Okay, Lynn?
voting yes.
Okay.
Split,
Anyone else online want to vote?
so I'm getting 8 total, is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
At 9.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that, please raise your hands. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1 online. 10.
Okay, perfect. So all opposed, do the same.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and online.
Nobody? Everyone online gonna vote? Okay, all right, so the motion passes. So we are moving OARs and policy and procedures into the governance committee as a standing committee.
Okay, so the next step would be everybody who said yes to be able to be in that committee, because they need people on that committee, because now they combine in one.
They were all the same people
No,
before.
no, not.
Yeah, they were. There was the same membership of OERs and PMP.
I don't know, maybe
Okay.
you have that on your list, but I was not in the PMP and I was in OAR. And if I remember, I did a lot of OAR.
Okay, let's just make sure that
Yeah.
if you are interested in the governance committee,
PMP
you
and
are
OER.
okay.
Who seconded that? Was it Connor?
Yeah, he's Andy. Okay, so, number 2, we are going to move the budget and audit, the training and education, and the data and research committee into a standing committee.
As well as the new governance committee?
That, we just voted on that.
We voted it as a standing committee?
Yes.
Okay, my bad.
Yep, we voted it as a standing committee.
You voted this on the meeting.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Combine them.
So moved.
Well, OER is already a standing committee, so if you combine policy and procedures into OERs, now all of a sudden it's not on the ad hoc committee list anymore.
So this is combining.
Okay,
What I
so
would see.
we are combining the budget and audit, the training and education, and
Yeah.
okay, do we have any discussion on that? Okay, so, same thing, let's raise our hands because I don't know where people stand on this. All approve, please raise your hand.
Bring in speed stick for you next time.
I got
It's great.
do it differently, because I don't think you have anybody who's opposed.
Nobody raised their hand online. Okay, I'm just making sure, just chill out.
I am chill.
Okay, so all opposed, all
Yeah, I can
opposed,
see
state
because
the
of
same,
the-
do the same.
None opposed.
None opposed. Okay, no response. Okay, hearing none, that motion passes. So those committees get moved over to a standing committee. So here's the last one. The notification and boundaries committee. We are going to eliminate that committee. However, the concept is going to be, it's going to go into the cost analysis.
Data and research.
Yeah.
Yes, but the cost analysis report.
Yeah.
The-
It's going to one committee though.
But I would think cost analysis should be in budget and audit.
That's where I brought up the issue.
Was it budget and audit?
Beginning, and then it went to an ad hoc.
No, I would think it would be in budget.
No,
COGS should be budget and audit, right?
yeah, no, I brought it up at the budget meeting, the budget committee.
So it's not so data driven as it is. If that's what the concept was to ultimately get it COGS, then it seems like.
Let's
budget.
just say concept at this time, and then when Nate brings in a concept
We can assign it.
submission form, we will move it to a committee. How about that?
I think,
Needs crumbs along the way to get me.
okay, go ahead, so I will.
Okay. All right, so did we get what we were,
I think we're just disbanding it for now and figuring out where it goes later.
Yeah.
Is that
we're just disbanding it now,
Okay.
but the concept is going somewhere else.
but we don't know where. Okay.
Correct.
Anybody else want to vote for that? I'll make a motion to do it.
Okay,
I move that we disband the notification boundaries committee and we figure out where it's gonna land when Nate
Or we
presents.
just postpone this back to the next board meeting.
Just get rid of the
If
committee
you-
for now?
You
Yeah.
know, just wait until,
why do we have to wait?
wait till it has a place to go.
Well, Nate's bringing in the concept submission.
Okay, thanks.
Oh my God.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, thank you.
Casey,
I was gonna
second.
second my motion.
You can't do that.
I'm gonna try.
Okay. All approve, please say aye.
Do we have to raise our hands?
All opposed, state the same. Okay.
I do need to document the 5 naysayers on the first one now.
Sure.
So if you were one of the 5, please raise your hand. So
Lots.
Connor,
You need,
Mitch was a no.
Casey,
I was always a no.
Mitch.
On different things.
And I don't think Nathan voted.
I can vote. I absolutely can vote. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that, so now we need to update the P&P manual. So it will go into the P&P manual now, and what we just did.
To governance. Governance will now review that item.
Oh, sorry, governance. Yes, you're right. Okay. So, the next one, I'm proposing, and like I said, this one is just, this one here, we don't need to talk about right now. I think this really needs to go into the governance committee and really hash out. But, what I'm proposing are committee roles and guidelines. And so it will establish what committees need to do and what the committee's chairs, their roles are, and what the members' roles are. So I have a list of things. These just came to my mind where I felt like it would be more in line with our strategic plan, and we can keep in line with what we are trying to do as a whole board. And if somebody were to step away from that committee, the other person can just look at what is going on in your action plan summary and then take over that committee. It should not be a huge issue. So, yes, Jessica?
Committees get work referred to them by the board. Sometimes that's longer term work.
Yep.
Sometimes it's short term work.
Absolutely.
So maybe there needs to be recognition of if I'm making a P&P manual change, we're turning that over, bringing that back to the next board meeting. There's not a long-term work project there, but maybe this is only appropriate for sort of longer-term projects that take multiple steps and.
Are you talking about the action plan?
Or any sort of documentation of what the committee is doing, right? Other than the minutes, which is what actually is the true codification of what the committee is doing. I don't know, I think this needs to be thought about in terms of the length of work, the period of work that we expect the committees to be doing on an individual item, right? If Publicity's looking at a contract, they're in a contract review process, the minutes are gonna capture where they're at, and that's probably not a lot of moving parts, they're doing one thing, right? If they're doing lots of things and it's gonna happen for a long period of time, maybe it makes sense to look at it some other way, but.
I don't know, I really like your action plan. That's honestly where I came up with that idea.
My work log? I had to organize it somehow. So I knew what the hell I was doing.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
that wasn't, but that's.
So it's essentially the same thing. We can call it a work log, whatever you guys want to call it. And it doesn't have to be monthly. It could be whatever. But these are just ideas that I came up with, trying to make it easier for new members as well on what they are supposed to do, what's expected of them, what is going on in that committee. Do they even want to be a part of it? So
we're moving to a working board at this point.
No, we're not.
No.
But
Yeah,
I think
it
this
looks
might be something, I think staff has something like this, because you're keeping track of what issues that are open in committees, because you're at every committee meeting, right? So you have something, and maybe it's just daylighting that and saying, does this meet our needs? So we all know what the committees are doing. Is that?
I think a lot of the times the committee chairs don't necessarily have a direction. And I think that would just.
You could be, which one?
So, what is your yearly plan? What do you want to get done this year? Who is going to be in charge of it? How long do you think it's gonna take? Just steps like that. I mean, anyway,
So it all goes to whatever committee you are, whatever chair you are, and what's your possibility, how to extend. So there's one thing called money that actually puts you down right away on some of the committees. Some other committees, like Jessica one, those are the hard ones, because those are working committees. They actually are working with,
Doing stuff.
doing stuff. It's not like like training and education committee, we're pretty much looking into who's doing the training, who's coming to class, what's new in the world, how can we improve this? And of course, when we talk about how can we improve this, we all get a hit by, well, you don't have money, so why you even look at that?
And that's
You know.
fine, this is
Why
just
you need a
something
committee?
to.
Yeah, why you
collect
need a
your
committee? I
thoughts.
mean, we put everything,
So, anyway, I also suggested, establishing your voting members, making sure who you know can vote. Just these basic guidelines to begin with. Your voting members, all meetings scheduled 2 to 3 weeks ahead time. I mean, these are things that, like I said, just, we need to hash it out to have these guidelines so everyone knows what to expect. Polling before a meeting. Brought over into the governance committee and we hash out what is happening.
Now list item I have, which is, we have the employee handbook.
Yep.
We've talked about doing a board member handbook, a
Yep.
guide, and so this could be part of that as well, but that's a longer term project.
And that's
Seems like
what
another,
I was
another
thinking.
thing to develop.
yeah.
That's what the
Start
PMP
engagement
manual
with
is
that.
supposed to be for.
Not necessarily. I mean, if we're talking about guidelines for service, it's not necessarily a policy.
Okay, then it's bylaws.
Not really the intent of bylaws.
I know, but that's how we use them. Like, we have meetings, we have who's qualified to be a board member. I mean, it's one of those two existing manuals, it's not a third.
Yeah, if I felt like there could be a purpose for a board handbook, especially for orientation, with someone coming on about roles, responsibilities, what to expect, and kind of like an employee handbook, but because the policy and procedures manual is much more than that, and the bylaws are much less than that. But
Okay,
But we
so,
have committee function in here.
yeah,
Right.
committee, not
So-
individual.
Right, and
Trust me, I'm not looking to create more work
I
for
don't want
myself.
another
I think
manual, so.
The bigger issue right now is prioritization,
Right.
so.
I mean, you've got, so in Article 2, Board of Directors, where we have our powers statement, that, you know, some of this could fit in there, like, an obligation to participate in a committee, right? That's a bylaw discussion. The mechanics of meeting scheduling, committee meeting scheduling, under 1.4, committees appointed by the board, right there, before we get into, you know, the individual committees, we could easily put some guidelines, but policy and procedure, governance is not going to want to speak on behalf of the whole board for something like this. We're gonna want guidance.
yes.
Committee members are not gonna wanna make these rules in a vacuum, so I would ask that the board consider having a discussion at our next meeting about what we might want to see and give some direction to policy, to governance, policy and procedures. So that we can embark on language, so we don't come back to a board meeting and have a greater discussion than is necessary. So I'd ask this to be
So-
tabled where we could have a more robust discussion next meeting.
Or
Advisory
Or you
board.
can come to the governance meeting or the governance committee meeting.
I'm just gonna come back with a list of questions to the board that we need to, before we write a policy. I wouldn't feel
And that's
comfortable
to
with
be
what's here.
expected. Absolutely, that would be expected. So I need a motion in order for this concept submission form to be sent over to, I'm just gonna put the policy and procedures / governance committee, because, I mean, what do we say right now?
We're just guessing now.
Yeah. What?
Are we guessing now?
Oh, God.
No,
Mitch, don't
we
talk.
just changed this.
Okay.
So what do you put in the minutes? Mitch?
Governance.
Okay. So to send to the governance committee for further discussion. Is that a no?
Are you asking me a question?
We're waiting for a motion.
Okay.
I'm waiting for,
I'll move.
thank you.
One second.
Okay. Thank you, Casey. Any more discussion? Okay, all approved, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, state the same. Okay. Wow. All right, it passes. It's going into governance.
Be ready for a giant list of questions.
Don't cut
Okay, do we have anything else? Anything for good of the order?
I'm just gonna be quiet.
Okay, our next scheduled meeting is in Salashan. We'll be in Salashan, Thursday, July 18th. Remember, the OUCC meeting is prior to, so come to that. Otherwise, travel safe.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay,
Third.
any discussion? Approved? Okay, I'll, any nays?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.